So one of our newer product, well, I say newer, it's probably been out for about 5 years, but this is to promote students' independence in selecting textures that they like as they're coloring, just off-the-shelf coloring pages, or we do furnish some coloring pages, raised line drawing coloring pages with this kit. But it offers 8 different textured plates, and they're very thick and durable. They won't break easily. They're translucent blue material, and they capture very discernible textures from one another. So you have like a diagonal striped, a wavy, a real bold bumpy, a smaller bumpy texture, and a zigzag texture. I'm losing one of the other ones in there. And then this top plate, this actually was a suggestion from field evaluators that they wanted a plate that just had some fun embossable shapes, like a star, a heart, there's a spiral shape, and a square, and a triangle. So what you do is very simple. You just put the child would pick on their own what textures they want to transfer to their coloring page. They put that underneath. There's a non-skid tray. You first put the selected drawing pad or mat into the tray, and then you can put the coloring page directly on top of the textured plate. Then taking commercially available crayons, I always like using, if you're familiar with them, they're long, twistable crayons. They're very hard to break, and you can really put a lot of pressure on the crayon as you're scraping or rubbing across those textures that transfer the texture to the coloring page. So interestingly, even though it looks like a finite option there, each plate, if you turn it over, it will afford additional textures. For instance, if you take the bold, bumpy texture, if you rub on top of that, obviously you're going to get sort of that bumpy texture transferring. But if you flip it over, you're going to get more of a honeycomb texture where the crayon rides into the recessed areas of those bold bumps. So that offers you even more options for textures to transfer to your coloring pages. So what's featured on this slide here are some coloring pages that students generated on their own during field test. Again, we provide some raised line drawing coloring pages. And some examples here, a kite, a butterfly, which is real popular, the tulip, a teddy bear, a little tree, a t-shirt, and balloons. And one student even colored their balloon coloring page and then wrote a Braille story to go along with the coloring page, which was really kind of cool. But you can see when you look at those images, you can tell where the crayon picked up the texture from the plate and transferred that to the coloring page. So that's just an option here. Again, you can get replacement coloring pages, if you will, or we also offer some assorted packages such as the Color by Texture Circus coloring pages, and you can get those as a whole separate replacement part if you like. And here are some of the coloring pages that are included with the Color by Texture marking mats that I showed you earlier. But what's nice about this is that APH has a tactile graphic image library. And if you go to our website and just search Tactile Graphic Image Library, and I have a link in this slide, that will take you to thousands of free downloadable tactile images that you can emboss or print out and embellish, or maybe even highlight those lines with a different, like a graphic art tape, which I'll show you later, and then use those as your coloring pages. So even if you don't want to buy replacement coloring pages, you can go directly to the Tactile Graphic Image Library and just search whatever coloring page is of interest to you, download it for free and emboss it, or just print it out as a black image, black outline image, and embellish those boundary lines for coloring purposes if you want to. Another tool that may not be as apparent for a drawing option is our tactile graphic line slate. And if you're familiar with just the ordinary use of a Braille slate, it mimics that same structure. You have an upper plate and a lower plate, and you sandwich whatever material you want to use, whether it's standard Braille paper, 80 to 100 pound. It could be your tactile drawing film that we saw earlier. It could be aluminum diagramming foil, and I'll show you examples of that, or say a 5,000 or fairly thin piece of vinyl. And so you can sandwich that material between those two plates just like you would a Braille slate and stylus. It comes with a two-ended stylus. One end is sharp and one end, well, not sharp in terms of dangerous sharp, just point. And then the other end is rounded. So depending on what type of line you're drawing or tooling onto the selected material, you will use one end of that stylus or the other. So you have options, very commonplace tactile lines that your child will eventually encounter a lot in tactile graphics, whether it's a bumpy line or a dashed line or a solid line, a thin line, what I call a railroad track line, or even one of those lead lines. It's a lead line typically extends from something that's identified within a tactile graphic to a Braille label. So it's lower profile and it's a very tight dotted line. So what surprised me when I field tested this, I really had the Braille transcriber in mind or the tactile artist in mind, but because it was fairly intuitive in terms of mimicking that typical Braille slate structure, students were able to use this tool independently to add tactile lines to their drawings.
I think this one would be a fun one.
It's fun to just experiment with.
Yeah.
And there's, again, no right or wrong. Just the process is kind of fun of just seeing something as you're tooling it actually emboss. Now, keep in mind, it's just like a Braille slate and stylus. Whatever you tool is going to emboss on the opposite side of the page. So it's that type of thing. So it takes a little bit of more planning or understanding that it's not going to be an instantly raised graphic. It's going to appear on the opposite side of the page that you tool on.
Very cool.
This is really a commercially available product, but the way APH packages it, we tried to offer graphic art tape. There's 3 different widths that make it unique for what we sell. So the thinnest width is 1/16 inch, and the next middle intermediate size is 1/8, and then the widest is 1/4. So this actually this idea came from a teacher, Anna Swenson, who had used it to do just some real simple bar graphs, some maps, and you can use the different widths in combination with each other. The thinner width is a little bit more forgiving if you want to do like a curved line. But I find this to be real helpful, especially if you're thinking about maybe adapting some game boards for your student to play at home. You could take this graphic art tape and just maybe highlight the grid lines or the paths on the game board, or something within a storybook that you might want to highlight or just add some tactile interest to. It's pretty forgiving. If you put it in the wrong place, you can usually peel it up without too much damage and reposition it if you do it quickly. But it has, it's not a slick filling tape. It has sort of a crepe texture to it. So if you put it on just some regular Braille paper, you're going to feel a little bit more roughness to it than against the paper itself, if that makes sense. Okay. Another option we have is Carousel Textures kits. We now offer 2 kits, and the types of materials or sheets that are included in both kind of complement each other, but are different from each other as well. So you'll encounter within these kits, usually they're 8.5 by 11 sheets for the most part, that are either fully adhesive backed, that either you or your students can cut shapes from, or if they're not adhesive backed, such as these translucent sheets with different textures, there's some double adhesive material within the kits that you can apply to make them adhesive backed. Or we even have in the kit some sticky dots. It's a commercially available product, and you just say you wanted a triangle cut out of any of that material. You cut your triangle out, and then the sticky dot sheet, you just peel the upper layer or liner up, and you'll encounter some real aggressive sticky dots, and you put the triangle down on those sticky dots to transfer them, and they're instantaneously adhesive backed, which is really convenient and easy to use. So within these kits, some of my favorite parts in here that are not commercially available that APH actually produces at our company are these translucent 8.5 by 11 sheets that capture some fun textures. I call this like a bubble texture and a wavy texture and a brick texture and a grid texture. So again, these are really convenient for everything from, you can use it for labeling material to adapting storybooks, game boards, or just open-ended art activities that your students might want to engage in. So it's
This
just,
again, this is one of my favorite products by far, and I think it's one of those, the creativity is endless. And I do have to agree, I love like the translucent sheets. Those are my favorite, but again, the textures, because like some of them feel like grass or some of them are smooth, you're really able to kind of, I would say, create that picture if it's outside, you know, cut the grass that's at the bottom and maybe that becomes part of the tree. So this is one of my favorites.
yeah, and I was just had a thought that came to me. And I'm sorry, I forgot what I was going to mention, but I'll come back to it. But yeah, those textures, oh, I know what it was. The textures are included in the kits are meant to kind of really be apparently different from each other. So some of the textures would be something like corrugated paper versus something that feels like velvet or felt, or even the craft foam material, which is a nice, easy material to cut with scissors if your student is practicing using scissors and all those fine motor skills that they need to develop. A lot of these materials would be really easy for the student to cut through just using scissors. Yeah. Okay. Okay, this may not be an apparent art related product, but it offers two different platforms that are very commonplace for the complement a lot of the tools that we offer, like the hook back materials or the magnetic materials. One side of the board, there's two all-in-one boards. One is fairly large. Another one's a smaller version that fits more comfortably, like on a wheelchair tray or a student's desk. But one side of the board is Veltex, such similar to your picture maker board, and the other side is magnetic or metal and dry erase. So what's really convenient about it is that these arms here, this mechanism for the handle, detents to certain angling positions for your students, you know, either comfort level viewing or drawing, if you will, onto the board. So keep these in mind as just a very convenient tool that would accommodate whether they're using any of the hook back, Velcro backed materials, or if they just want to take a dry erase marker and draw on the board, is an option, or magnetic pieces, which I'll show you later. So, and then this is sort of a coming attraction, hopefully this year, pretty soon, is what I referred to when we looked at that little house drawing that the student created. And it's called Sensible Strips, and it's going to offer 4 different types of strips, from textures to the different border strips to shape like continuous rows of different